Hey everybody, it's Carter here in Vancouver. We are continuing on with the RZ 500 engine rebuild, and we are at the crank timing and balance shaft modification time. For those of you who are new to this, we are looking at a 1985 Yamaha RZ 500, which is a four-cylinder, two-stroke 500cc engine in a V formation with dual crankshafts and a balance gear in between the two crankshafts. So today we're going to look at how you time these two crankshafts so that they are running in the proper configuration for this engine, and how you time the balance shaft to the crankshaft so that the weights on the balance shaft are countering the weights on the crank webs. So as you can see on this balance shaft gear, they have a couple of marks etched in. One is looks like the letter D, and this looks like a crude circle or something that has been etched into the face of the gear. You can probably see it if I get it into the light a little bit differently. But that is your timing mark. I know it looks like it was done by either somebody on a Friday afternoon. He was being bugged by his coworkers. They were like, "Hey, the saki's getting cold. Let's get the hell out of here." And he was like, "Okay, let's go." My grandchildren's name are Hunter and Anna, so I'm going to call this mark the Hunter-Anna mark, because it looks like it was drawn by a 4-year-old. So that is the timing mark, and the timing mark on the gear that drives this balance shaft that is connected to the front crankshaft or the lower crankshaft has a punch mark, okay? And you can see that this punch mark is right in the middle of a gear tooth. And Hunter and Anna mark is right in between two teeth, so you know that those are going to mesh up properly. The D is in the middle of a tooth. That's never going to match up with a mark that's also in the middle of a tooth, so we know that that's not the mark. This is the timing mark. So from the factory manual, service manual, and it states, take your timing mark on your balance shaft and line it up with the punch mark on the drive gear. Once those two are lined up, as you can see, you run the crankshaft this way until that mark lines up with this protrusion in the crankcase that I've marked with a blue felt pen. So once that is lined up, and you've lined up this mark, your balance shaft is now timed with your front crankshaft, and your front crankshaft is timed to the configuration of the engine. Then on this rear crankshaft, they have a timing flywheel, because the balance shaft is only driven by one gear. So they put a timing flywheel on this side so that we know where to time this crankshaft. And again, you line up this punch mark. It's again an indentation, an actual punch mark, not a scribe like we find over here. You line that up with the protrusion in the crankcase, which again I have marked with a blue felt pen. And now this crank is lined up and timed for the configuration of this motor. However, this is wrong. This number 3 cylinder is at top dead center, and number 4 cylinder is now at top dead center. Number 1 and 2 are both at bottom dead center. If this engine was put back together, if it even would run, it would vibrate so much it would fall right out of the frame. So that means we have a screw up with this gear. We are 180 degrees out. Now, the only video that I could find online about doing this modification was from a guy in Great Britain. His YouTube handle is R1 Yamdude. And he had his, I'm guessing, European version RZ 500, and he only had one mark on this gear, and it was the punch mark. And he only had one mark on this flywheel, like me, a punch mark. When he did what I just did and lined up the punch marks and lined up the crankshafts with their timing marks, he was at top dead center on cylinder number 2 and top dead cylinder on cylinder number 3, which is exactly what we want. It's the configuration of the engine. That's how it fires. So clearly there's something wrong with this gear. Now, I looked on the internet, and this is where on the internet you find nothing but mass confusion over these gears and these markings and everything. There's lots of people on the forums going, oh my God, I took my bike apart and now what mark do I use? So clearly this is not the mark. And if you look very closely, you can see that someone, or from the factory, they have marked, etched or scribed an X over top of this punch mark. And then 180 degrees out, wouldn't you know, they've etched in another timing mark. Except this one, it looks like this one was done by a dude on a Monday that did no drinking over the weekend. It's a perfect circle. It looks exactly like the punch mark, except it's etched in there. Okay, and it too has a D that means nothing. You know, I don't know, drunk. Maybe that's what that meant. Anyways, if you take this and now line up that new timing mark with the timing mark on the balance shaft, and then we run that up to our pointer, we are now at top dead center, and top dead center, cylinder number 2 and number 3, which is what we want. So clearly, there was an issue with this gear at the factory. Whether this was an accident or an improvisation, I don't know. But clearly, they have stamped out an X over this to tell the guys on the factory line, no, don't use this one anymore. We're now using this one. Why they did this, I don't know, and how many bikes in how many different countries got this configuration. I know that some of these gears have an X on them, some of them have a C on them, depending on, I don't know, whether they were, what time of the year they were coming off the assembly line, or what region of the world they were being shipped to. But if you look on the internet, these gears have all sorts of different markings on them, and it's where the confusion comes in. But clearly, this is the timing mark because it puts our engine in the configuration that is required. Now, when we are perfectly timed, I've marked this balance gear with a mark on the mating surface of the crankcase, just because I want to see, once I'm done this modification, which is switching gear for flywheel, whether or not this balance gear ends up in the same position or if it's 180 out. So the fix for this, which is the balance shaft modification, which came out in a report from Yamaha in 1985, I believe, probably late 85. This gear driving the balance shaft on the lower crank was creating a vibration in the foot pegs and some engine noise. So Yamaha's fix was to move this gear to the upper crank and put the flywheel down onto the lower crank. So to do this, they sent out a report so that you would know how to get your new timing marks on these gears. So if you look for this new timing mark that they ask you to put on this flywheel, because it's going onto this other crankshaft, they give you this, which is they ask you to make a mark which is 180 degrees from the original alignment mark, almost. They say go 3 to 5 millimeters counterclockwise from center, and that's where your mark will be. Then they ask to take from your original timing mark on the gear, count 13 teeth and make a mark. And then continue counting down to the 18th tooth and make a mark there. So I've done that on both accounts, but trying to get this mark using math is way out of my realm. So luckily I watched the video from the guy in the UK, R1 Yam Dude, and he had a brilliant idea, which was to simply take this gear off, or this timing flywheel, and put it over here, over top of the gear, and now you can make an extremely accurate mark, lining up your original timing mark on the gear with the flywheel. So once we've done that, we can now switch our gears over, and I'm going to show you how we do that. First, we're going to turn the crankshaft so that when I pull this off, our key doesn't fall onto the floor. That would be an embarrassing video moment. So we take our gear and we put it over to this side, and we take our flywheel and we put it over to this side. We know that our new timing mark is right there, and sure enough, that puts us at top dead center on cylinder number 2. And then, as you can see from the field report, you are now going to use that 13th tooth as your balance shaft timing mark. And then your 18th tooth will become the new crankshaft timing mark. So if we do that here, we take the 13th tooth and we align it with the Hunter Anna mark, or the Drunken Saki mark. And now our balance shaft is timed to the crankshaft. And we move number 18 to the pointer on the crankcase. You can see that we are now at top dead center on cylinder number 3, top dead center cylinder number 2, and the balance shaft hasn't moved. It stayed in the exact same place that it was when the original timing was in place. So that's it. That is how you time your crankshafts and do the balance shaft modification, with an explanation about what is going on with all of these extra markings on some of the gears across the world. And we can now put our drive gears on, followed by our clutch basket, which meshes with those drive gears. And that's where it gets critical to keep these marks lined up while those gears are getting meshed together. If it moves over one gear, then you're out. You have to redo your clutch basket until you get it where these are both still aligned perfectly. Once you've done that, you're ready to go ahead and install the rest of your clutch and move on to other parts of the build. So thanks again for watching, you guys and gals. We shall see you soon, and keep the shiny side up.
Say sweet things to me.